Alright, tubes, what's going on? We're going to be pulling the head gasket, or rather the whole entire head off the Mustang today, so that we can get the heads checked out and then replace the head gasket. And so this is going to be my video for today. And what I'm going to try and do here, so this is kind of going to be like, I want this to be like a guideline kind of video. So if you're here because you're wanting to know, what's involved with replacing a head gasket on a 4.6, particularly Mustang, but really probably pretty similar, definitely hang around. Or if you're here just because this is my latest video, definitely hang around too, because I'm still going to try and make it somewhat interesting. Pretty much the way I'm going to be doing this is just like a straight up pragmatic approach, and what I mean by that is that I don't have a Chilton's manual or anything like that, so I'm not going to be following a specific procedure here. I'm just going to start taking things off as I see necessary. So the first thing I got to get out of the way here is the radiator. Probably don't have to pull the whole radiator out. Definitely got to get the reservoir and stuff out of the way. And believe it or not, the cooling system is probably one of the easiest things to get out of the way on a Mustang, so I'll probably end up just pulling that off. Alright, so I got our coolant reservoir ready to come out, and the way it works on the Mustangs is instead of having a separate overflow and a cap right on the radiator, what they actually have is this is it. This is your overflow tank and your actual coolant cap. But anyway, I got it ready to come off here. There's just 3 bolts that hold it on. They're both, all 3 of them are 10 millimeters. And there's just this little line that goes to the radiator, so that came off. There's a little electrical connector which goes to the sending unit, and then the only other thing is that big line right there which hooks into the bottom of it. So once they're all there, get this thing out of here. I think for the time being I'm going to leave the radiator in here. I might end up deciding to take it out. It only takes about 2 bolts, but I also got to get under the car and undo the coolant line. So if I don't have to, I'm not going to take it out. Got a pretty decent amount of room in here. But I'm going to get this big hose out of the way here. Alright, so the next thing we're going to start working towards is getting the whole intake manifold off of here, because the intake manifold bolts up to the top of the head. So in order to get the head off, you got to take the whole intake manifold off. So I guess what we can start with here is getting this cold air intake out of here. I don't know how this intake differs from the stock intake. Maybe it is the stock intake, but it doesn't look like it to me. Fortunately, whatever it is, it's not going to be hard to get off. We just got a clamp holding it to the throttle body, so we'll just loosen that up. We got 2 electrical connectors. One's the mass airflow sensor, and I guess maybe the other one, I'm not sure if it's an air temp sensor or what, but we'll unplug them and get them out of the way. Also got these 2 lines hooked up here. I'm actually going to unhook them from what they go to, because ultimately I think that'll make it easier. The one is just a breather which we can pull right out of the valve cover. And then the other one here looks like it's hooked up to an idle air control valve, but it's the same deal. We can just slide that right off of there. Last but not least, we only got 1 bolt holding the rest of this thing in here, just 1/8 millimeter, so we'll just pull that out of there. Should be good to go. A highly effective air filtration system. I'm not sure what they were thinking when they designed that one. Alright, so the next thing I want to get out of the way here is all the ignition system stuff that's in the way. We got coil packs here, we got plugs and wires and all kinds of stuff that's in our way. Now, I got a question for you guys. I'm kind of new to Mustangs, not new to Fords, but new to Mustangs. And something kind of strange about this, in my opinion. The way they designed the ignition system here is, of course, it's a V8, and so instead of having one big coil pack with 8 different cylinders on it, you got 2 separate coil packs. You got one on this side, one on this side. Each one has 4. Now, the way that they did it is instead of having this coil pack be for this side of the engine, only 2 of these go to plugs on this side of the motor. The other 2 go to the other side. So instead of having this nice and neat, and for me to take this out of here, I could just undo all the spark plug wires and then just unbolt this thing, pull it out of here. I mean, it's really not actually that much harder, but it just doesn't really make any sense to me. So let me know down in the comments. There's probably a really good reason, or maybe there's not. But there's probably a reason why they designed it that way. So let me know if you guys know anything about that. Dad got us some new gloves, and he only bought extra larges. I don't know why. Nobody in the house wears an extra large. Must have been on sale. By the way, like, I'm a Ford guy. I got nothing against Fords. I love Fords. But sometimes when I'm working on them, I just got to ask myself, why'd they have to make this a 13 millimeter bolt? Why couldn't it have been a 12 millimeter or 14 millimeter, just like all the others? Alright, spark plugs are out of the way, coil pack's out of the way. Just so you guys know what I just did there, I don't want to leave you guys on the tripod too long and you not know what's going on, is I just pulled all 4 spark plug boots out, and then I unplugged all of the spark plugs from that particular coil pack. I took the coil pack off, and then I just set all of the plugs off to the side here. We'll determine later if they need to come off as well. Might as well get the belt off here, because that's going to have to come off at some point. The way this and pretty much any tensioner on just about any engine works is you got this little arm here, which is, there's a spring inside of there. And so what that spring's doing is forcing this arm to go this way, and that's what's keeping the chain tight, because there's a pulley on the end of there. I call it a chain, but I meant the belt. But anyway, the way you get tension off of this thing is there's a big square hole in here. It just so happens that that hole measures 1/2 inch, just like this socket. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this socket in here. I'm going to push down on the socket, and that'll take all the tension off of our belt. And then I can slip the belt off their pulleys here. We just have to be careful that we don't let go of that while there's you know, your fingers under there or something. Otherwise, it might take your finger off. I'd say that might be the source of some of the noise we had under here. Doesn't feel like there's a particularly large amount of play in this pulley here, but it was making a lot of noise. So I'm going to pull the, might as well just pull this tensioner off. I already took 2 of the bolts out. There's just 3 bolts holding that in. And to be honest, I'm not entirely sure that this would actually need to come off. We definitely have to take the timing cover off, because that's what will allow us to take the slack off the timing chains eventually. But I might as well just take this off, because it'll make things easier to see, and next time I'll know. I'll let you guys know as a courtesy whether or not this actually needed to come off. Same thing with this idler pulley here. I don't necessarily think that it needs to come off. However, it'll make accessing this particular bolt here, which does need to come off, a lot easier. Get our crank pulley out of the way here. I'd use an impact, but my impact gun's pretty weak, so I'm just going to give it a couple taps here. I already loosened it up off the camera, but that came off pretty easy. I'm trying to find our puller here. We used to have a whole bunch of them over here, but right now the only one I can find is this big thing. Alright, well in the meantime, while I'm waiting for my dad to show me where all the pullers are at, I guess I'll start taking the valve cover off. Or the cam cover, as some of you may prefer. Alright, so I got myself a puller for the harmonic balancer. I actually got the right tool for the job. So we're going to be using that in a minute. But I just got done using a large combination of extensions, universals, and deep sockets in order to get all the bolts out of this valve cover, or cam cover here. So I'm going to pull that off now. I have no idea what to expect. I don't know what's going to be under that. I will say that a lot of the grommets are in pretty poor shape, so I probably should replace those. And you can kind of see down below where it was leaking, so I ought to replace the valve cover gasket too. But let's see what's under there.
inside now. So as you just saw there, we got the harmonic balancer off, and what I was doing, I was jacking up the car so I could get to the exhaust manifold and unbolt the bolts, not from the manifold to the head itself, because that would be near impossible to get to, but rather from the flange to the rest of the exhaust. And I'm having a lot of trouble with one of them, so I actually lowered it back down here for the time being, and I'm going to work on getting the intake manifold off of here, because that's also going to have to come off. So I've already started taking out most of the bolts here, and they're pretty much all 10 millimeters. You got one in the front here, you got one over here, you got another one here, another one here, and another one here. So a total of 5 bolts on the one side, and then the same goes for the other side. Actually, I think there's 6 on this side. You got one all the way in the back here, you got one right here, one right here, one right here, and 2 over here. Now this one here is a little bit difficult to get to. This little thing right here is in the way. That's for your evap system. And so what I did to get to it is, instead of taking the whole thing off, I just took this screw out here, and then I just took this thing and bent it out of the way, and then I was able to get down with a extension and get that bolt out. Next thing we got to get out of the way here is all of the wires going to our fuel injectors here. Each fuel injector has a wire going to it. And so what we want to do is we want to disconnect each one, and that way we can get this whole wiring harness out of our way. Also got a throttle position sensor, which we'll remove, and this coolant temperature sensor down here. And last but not least, we got this idle air control valve connection here. Once that's done, we can kind of pull our wiring harness out of the way here, and it doesn't have to be totally free of the engine, it just has to be free of the manifold, because the manifold is going to be coming straight off. So I mean, if this is over here, that's not really a problem, it just can't be all tangled up in the manifold. And of course we'll do the same for the other side. I've already done all of the injectors, and you just have one other temperature sender over here which has to come off. You have your connector here on the valve for the evap system, that's got to come off. And then there's a little tiny ground wire, comes off of here, goes and sits on a bolt right there, so that's got to come off. Next thing I want to take care of is our fuel lines. As you can see here, we've got our 2 fuel lines running up to the fuel rails here, and one of them is a return line, the other one's the feed line. This is another example where I don't quite understand Ford engineering, but perhaps there's a good reason for it. For some reason, they use 2 different types of connectors on these. On the one type, you can see this one over here, there's a little clip that slides through, and if you pull that clip out, then the line will slide right off. But on the other one, you need a special disconnect tool. Now why they couldn't have just put the clips on both sides, I don't really know. Alright, so of course this one we already took the clip off, so we can go ahead and take that line off. And this other one here I was able to disconnect. I made my own disconnect tool with a pen cap, because I sure didn't feel like going out to the store just to buy a set of tools, even though I use them a lot. I didn't feel like going out today. And last but not least here, we'll need to disconnect our throttle cable. So you have 2 different cables going to the actual throttle actuator. The first one, as you can see here, has a slot in the bottom so you can just lift it right off. The other one's a more traditional throttle cable where you just have to run this all the way out and then it'll slide out through a slot. Once that's loose, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this whole bracket off of here, because there's only 3 bolts holding it on, and there's a little vacuum line hooked up to it. Once I get that out of the way, I can just move this whole thing off to the side. Removing that bracket also gives us access to this nut here, which we'll need to loosen up in order to get the EGR tube out of the way. There are a few vacuum lines still hooked up we'll have to get out of the way. One's just hooked up to the back of the throttle body here, so we can just slide that right off. And then there's also these coming over here, and they all go to this point right here, and this is a convenient place to just disconnect it. There's also a coolant line here. It's a bit difficult to see, but it comes out of the firewall here and goes down and goes into your intake manifold, and it just has a standard hose clamp on it. So we got to pull that hose clamp off of there and pull this line out of here, because otherwise it'll be holding this up and we'll have a hard time getting it off. It's 2 extra bolts to get the alternator out here. I'm really not saving anything by leaving it in there, and I think it'll make it a little bit easier, because what you have going on is you got the EGR tube coming up behind the manifold there, and that makes it hard for you to just tilt the manifold up and come out this way. So if we get this alternator out of here, we shouldn't have to come up on quite as much of an angle, and that should make it a little easier to get it out of here. I hope. Alright guys, thanks for hanging around for that last section there. I'm well aware that that was getting a little bit on the boring side. But thanks for sticking through it. If you guys made it this far, that's good, because I got something pretty interesting to show you. Now, I originally thought that this thing needed a head gasket for two basic reasons. The one being the fact that it was spraying liquid out the back of the head. You can even see on the firewall where coolant had been spraying out and it left a stain. And in addition to that, it was also blowing out white smoke out of the exhaust, and that's a characteristic sign of a blown head gasket, because what's happening is you actually have coolant leaking into the cylinder and burning, or not really burning, but vaporizing into steam, and that's why you get white smoke blowing out your exhaust. So based upon those two things, I was pretty sure that a head gasket was my problem. However, now that I got the head off, I'm kind of starting to re-question that. What I'm noticing here is that if we take a look at the head, it looks like where the water is spraying out is actually above where the head gasket would be. And now right at the area where it kind of looks like it might be spraying out, it's actually a coolant passage for the intake manifold. If we take a look at the manifold, there is a gasket that goes around that area that appears that it's sealing, although it's possible that maybe it's not. And in addition to that, this particular car, and a lot of the others that had the 4.6s in them, actually have a plastic intake manifold, and that manifold is known for cracking. So now what I'm thinking maybe what actually happened is, instead of having a blown head gasket, I've actually got a cracked intake manifold. And so what appeared to me to be signs of a blown head gasket, maybe what it actually was is it was actually coolant spraying out between that mating surface between the intake manifold and the block. And the reason there was white smoke coming out of the exhaust is because the coolant was leaking in through the intake and getting into the engine that way. I think where we're at now is we need to do a compression test. I should have done it before, although the work that I've done is work that I would have had to do regardless, even if it's actually a cracked intake manifold, so it doesn't really matter. So I'm going to end this video here, and we'll start the next one off with the compression test. And hopefully all the cylinders on that side have good compression. Well, on that side too, but I'm assuming there's nothing wrong there. That would be a whole other story if there's something going on there. But anyway, hopefully they've all got good compression. If they do, then I just have to take a closer look at the manifold and take a look at the gaskets and see if I can figure out where the leak's at. So that's going to be it for now. Thanks for watching this video. Definitely give it a thumbs up if you liked it. If you stuck through it this long, I'm assuming that you did. So go ahead and hit the thumbs up button, and leave a comment, like, subscribe if you're not a subscriber already. And I think that'll do it. All right, tubes. See you later.